Good morning, guys. Today, we are going to start our discussion related to Spring Security. So, what is this Spring Security and how to work with this Spring Security? So, this is Spring Security, which is used to secure our applications, right? So, when you go for any application, security is very important, which is going to play very crucial role in our application development. Security is very important for every web application. So whatever the application that we are developing, to protect the data available in the application, to protect the logic available in the application, we are going to implement this security concept. Now, so here by using this Spring Security, we can secure our applications. What is this Spring Security? Spring Security is one of the module of Spring Framework. Spring Security is one of the module that is available in the Spring Framework. By using this Spring Security concept, we can secure both web applications as well as REST APIs also. Whatever the web applications we are developing by using Spring Boot, or whatever the REST APIs we are developing by using Spring Boot, those applications can be secured by using the concept called Spring Security. Security is very important for every web application that we are developing. To protect our application, to protect our application data, we need to implement this security logic. So how to secure our Spring Boot applications? To secure our Spring Boot applications, there is a module in the Spring Framework. That module name is Spring Security module. Spring Security is one of the module available in the Spring Framework. Using this Spring Security concept, we can Spring Security concept we can use to secure our both web applications and REST APIs. When it comes to the security, mainly we need to talk about two important concepts. While securing, to implement the security, to implement the security, we need to know about two concepts, guys. One is called as authorization, another one is called authentication. When you are going for the security, so we need to know about what is authentication and we need to know about authorization. What is authentication and what is authorization? Okay, so authentication means it is basically login functionality, and authorization means basically access based functionality. So authentication represents who can access our application, login, credentials, validation. Authentication, authentication means verifying who can access our application. Basically, authentication means verifying who can access our application. And coming to authorization, what is the meaning of authorization here? Authorization means verifying which user can access which functionality. Okay, which user can access which functionality that can be implemented by using authorization. So when we are implementing Spring Security in our project, mainly two things we need to consider, guys. Mainly two things we need to consider. What are those two things here? The first one is authentication and the second one is authorization. So what is the difference between this authentication and authorization? Authentication means verifying who can access our application. Authorization means verifying which user can access which functionality in the application. Alright, so Spring Security is one of the module that is available in the Spring Framework. By using this Spring Security, we can secure both web applications as well as REST APIs also. Alright, now, so to implement this security, mainly we should know about two concepts, guys. One is called authentication, another one is called authorization. What is the meaning of this authentication and authorization? Authentication means verifying who can access our application. Authorization means verifying which user can access which functionality in our application? Which user can access which functionality in our application? Then how to add the security for the Spring Boot applications? Okay, working with the Spring security. How can we work with this Spring security, guys? So in order to work with the Spring security, there is a dependency available. To secure our Spring Boot applications, we need to add one dependency in the pom.xml. That dependency is called boot starter security dependency. So if you want to implement security for your application, then you need to add this dependency in the pom.xml. Okay, now let me go and create one simple Spring Boot application by adding these dependencies. Let me create one simple Spring Boot application by adding this dependency. So whenever we add this dependency in the pom.xml, by default, our application will be secured with one random password. Okay. Whenever we add this dependency in the pom.xml, whenever we are going to add this dependency in the pom.xml, then by default, our application will be secured with the basic authentication. It will generate a random password to access our application, guys. Note one. So in your Spring Boot application, if you add that above dependency, by default, it will provide the security for our application. That security is called HTTP basic authentication, and it will generate a random password to access our application. Okay. Now here we want to secure our Spring Boot application. So let me create one boot application, a simple REST API I'm going to create, and I'm going to show you how it is going to work. Spring starter project is there. Let me create one boot application. So 07 Spring security app. 07 Spring security application I'm taking. Click on next. So web starter, dev tools. So first time I'm going to add security starter for our application. Okay. So Spring security starter we are selecting. Click on next and click on finish. That's it. I just created one boot application. In that boot application, I have added this dependency. So to secure our Spring Boot application, we need to add a starter in the pom.xml. What is that starter? Boot starter security. When we add this dependency in the pom.xml file, then by default, our application will be secured with the basic authentication. Okay, how this basic authentication will work? It will generate a random password in order to access our application. Okay, now let us see here. Go to this project. Let me close all the unrelated projects. Yes. So Spring Boot application is available. Pom.xml file is available. Let us go to our pom.xml file. So in the pom.xml, we can see security starter is available, and web starter is available, and dev tools available. So already we know what is web starter, dev tools. Only thing which is new, that is security starter. Now let me create one simple REST controller here. New class. I'm creating a package .rest. So I'm creating message REST controller. All right. So how to represent this class as a REST controller? To represent this class as a REST controller, we are going for @REST controller annotation. Then let us write a method public string welcome. A very simple method I am writing here, return welcome. That's it. Welcome to Ashok IT, and I'm writing @getMapping with a /welcome. All right. So I have created one simple REST controller in our application. In this application, I have added one dependency called security starter. That's it. So this is a pom starter I have added. Now let me run my application, run as boot application. I'm running my application, run this as Spring Boot application now. See here, whenever we run the application, by default it generated one password for us. That password is printed on the console. This is default password, a random password which is generated to access our application. Now go to browser here. Now let me access our application. So by using localhost colon 8080/welcome. So when I access this application, by default, one login page is coming. So did I develop this login page, or this login page is coming by default, guys? I developed this login page. I developed this login page, or it is coming by default?
By default.
By default, it is
Yes.
getting.
This login page is coming by default. So who is providing this login page for us? Who is providing this
Security
login page for us?
dependency.
Starter.
Come on. Who is providing this login page for us?
Security starter.
Spring
Yes, this
security.
login page is provided by Spring Security. This login page is provided by Spring Security. All right, good. So here we want to secure our Spring Boot application. For that, we are going to use one dependency provided by Spring Boot, which is Security Starter. So in your application, when we add this dependency, by default, our application will be secured with HTTP basic authentication. So that basic authentication, it will generate random password to access our application. Then how we need to access our application? By default, username will be user and password will be available that we need to copy from the console. So in the console, one random password is printed. So we need this password in order to access our application. So let me copy this password. Now type the username, some dummy name, some dummy password. Click on sign in. Then what it is saying, guys? What it is saying now? Bad credentials. So what is the username? Username is user. What is the password? It is printed on the console. Click on sign in. Now, once I give valid username and password, are we able to access our application? Once we give the valid username and password, are we able to access our application now?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So we are talking about Spring Security. So what is security? For every application, security is very, very important. So by using this Spring Security, we can implement authentication and authorization for the Spring applications. So this can be used for both web applications as well as for REST APIs also. This Spring Security is one of the most famous module available in the Spring framework. Okay, now, so how to add this Spring Security for our applications? There is a dependency available. When you add this dependency in the pom.xml, then default security will be available for our application. The default security is called as HTTP basic authentication. Whatever the default security is available, that default security is called as HTTP basic authentication. So when we go for this basic authentication, it will generate random password to access our application. So the default username will be user and the password will be printed on the console. Okay, so when we access our application URL in the browser, it is displaying one login page for us to authenticate. So who want to access that application? For them, a login page will come for the authentication. Okay, fine. We are able to access this from the URL in the browser. How to access this from the Postman now? So same REST API. Earlier, we tested our REST APIs from the Postman. If you access from the browser, then the login page is coming and we are able to log in with the given username and password. So same REST API, how to access from the Postman, guys? So let me open Postman tool and let me access. So send a GET request for this one. Okay. GET request localhost colon 8080/welcome. So I created a REST API. In this REST API, I just added this dependency, nothing else. I created one REST controller In the project pom.xml, I added this dependency. Okay, good. Get request 8080/welcome. I'm sending the request. So now it is saying 401 unauthorized. Boss, you cannot access this application because of security. So my REST API is secured. Now how to access secured REST API? First of all, you need to understand what security is available for our application. Basic security is available for our application. For the basic security, the username is user and password is available on the console. So now in the browser, if you access, it will open a login page. Then you can enter your username and password to access that. But when you go for the Postman, there is no login page. When I send the request, it is failing. So how to access secured REST API? You go to this authorization tab. You select the authorization, which is basic authentication. So currently for our application, basic authentication is available. So you go to Postman. In order to access secured REST API, go to authentication type as basic auth. In the basic auth, you need to provide your username, which is user, and password is available in the console. Copy this password and you keep that password and click on send. So with this username and password, when I send the request, I'm able to access it. So that means for my application, authentication is working. So how authentication is working? We added this dependency in the pom.xml. Then basic authentication will come. Random password will be generated. It will be printed on the console. So default username is user and password is also printed on the console. We are able to access. So to access secured REST API from the Postman, what I have done in order to access. In order to access this secured REST API from the Postman, what we have done, go to Postman, send a GET request to this URL, go to authorization tab, select it as a basic authentication, give the username, give the password which is there on the console and click on send. Then I'm able to send the request and I'm getting the response as welcome to Ashok IT. I'm able to get the response welcome to Ashok IT. So with this we are able to access our secured REST API from the browser as well as from the Postman. So from the browser, when you access, it will display login form to authenticate our request. Then when we access this REST API from the Postman, we need to set the authentication values in the Postman to send the authentication type. We are using authentication type as basic authentication. Username we are giving as user. Password we are taking from the console. Username we are giving as user. Password we are taking from the console, and we are able to run our application. We are able to access our application. Guys, are you clear with this as of now? How to add the security for our project and what will happen when we add this dependency in the pom.xml? How to access secured REST API URL from the browser? How to access secured REST API URL from the Postman? Are you clear with this concept?
So I got also same, sir.
Sorry?
So I got also same, sir.
I did not get your question.
Sir, how to access Swagger tool, sir? This.
He is
How to-
asking if Swagger is also same, sir. Swagger.
Swagger, yes, authentication tokens we can set in that. Okay. So Spring Security is one of the important module in the Spring framework which provides authentication authorization logic for you. How to add the security for our project? There is a security starter available. Add this in the pom.xml. Then it will provide basic authentication for our application. In the basic authentication, username is user and password we can copy from the console. So when you access from the browser, login page will come. When you access from the Postman, you need to set the authentication values in the header. How to do that? So here there is the authorization tab. You need to select the basic authentication. Username is user and password is available. So with this, we are able to access secured REST API from Postman also. But
Sir,
is
how
it
security knows whether it is coming from browser or Postman, sir?
headers will be available. So whatever, whether you are sending from the, when you send from the postman with authorization or when you send from the browser, header is same. It will check header is present or not. If the header is present with the basic auth username password, then only it will process. Otherwise, it will not process. It doesn't make a difference whether you are accessing from browser or postman. The thing which it will consider, the basic authentication header is coming with the username password or not. You got my point?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good. Now, guys, here if you observe, the password is generated on the console. It printed on the console. When I stop and start my application, then what will happen? Same password will come or a different password will come now.
Different password.
Different one.
When I run my application, same password will come or different password will come. Different password. So password is going to change, guys. So random password, right? Generated security password, it is random password. I don't like this random password. I want to fix some username and password for my application. I don't want to go with the default credentials to secure my application, guys. So how to override the Spring Security default credentials? By default, username is coming as user and password is printed on the console. I don't want to go with those details. I want to override those credentials. Okay. To override default credentials of basic authentication, we need to configure security credentials in properties file, or you can configure security credentials in the YML file. Anything is fine. Either you can use the properties file or you can use a YML file to override default credentials. So how to configure them? Spring.security.username, spring.security.user password. So what are the credentials you want to use? What are the credentials you want to configure for the authentication? That can be configured by using the properties in the properties file or YML. If you don't configure these properties, then it will take the default credentials. If you configure these properties, that means we are overriding the default credentials. We are overriding the default credentials. Now go to our application, open properties file. Currently there are no properties available. So let me add the properties. Spring.security.user.name. What is the username you want to use for authentication? Then similarly, spring.security.user.password. Okay, so username something like Ashok IT and password I'm giving Ashok IT @123. All right, so I want to override default credentials. So to override the default credentials, we are using this username, user password properties. So once you configure these properties in the properties file, let me do the Maven update. Whenever you change the properties file or YML file, we need to update our project, guys. I'm updating our Maven project now. This project got updated. So let me go and run my application. Click on run this. Application is getting started. Run this. My application is getting started. Now, can you see random password is printed on the console? Random password is not printed on the console. Guys,
Not
random
not
password is printed on the console. Random password is not printed on the console.
Not printed.
Not printed, sir. No.
Random password not printed on the console. Why it is not printing?
because we have configured username and password in properties
In our
file.
properties file, we have configured our username and password. That's why default credentials are not coming. Now go to Postman. Let us try to access with the previous username and password. Click on send. Is it allowing me or it is not allowing me?
It is
Am
not.
I able to access or I'm not able to access? Not able to access. Now give the correct username, which is Ashok IT, and password Ashok IT @123. Send the request. Now So when I give valid username and valid password, then only I'm able to access my application. From the browser also, let me close it because of cookies will be available. Let me reopen my browser and let me access it, guys. Localhost colon 8080/welcome. Then again login page is coming. Okay, so we need to give username and password. Now if I give the wrong data, I'm getting bad credentials. This login page provided by Spring Security. I have not developed this login page. Okay, whenever you add that security starter in the project, by default that login page will be provided. Give the username Ashok IT and password Ashok ID @123. Sign in. Now I am able to access my application. That means my authentication got successful. Our authentication got successful. I hope you got the clarity how to override default security credentials. By adding these two properties in the properties file or YML file, we can override those default credentials. Are you clear with my point? Are you guys
Yes,
clear
sir.
with my point?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, if you send through REST template, how to send these parameters, sir? Like through
In the
HTTP header?
headers, HTTP headers object you need to create and you need to send it.
And there we need to select like auth basics. That one, how can we
Yes,
select?
header key will be authentication and value will be username colon password.
Okay, sir. Okay. Username colon password. Okay, sir.
Yeah, good. So security, one of the important module that supports authentication and authorization. To add the security, this is the dependency. It is giving default basic authentication. Default username will be user. Password is generated on the console, printed on the console. Okay, if you access from the browser, login page will come. If you want to access from the Postman, then you need to send this request in the header. Authorization is the header, key and value. Key is authorization, value is username, password we need to send. How to override the security default credentials? By adding these two properties, we are overriding the default credentials. Okay, now let's understand one point here. REST controller is available. Currently, there is only one method is available. Now let me go for another method, which is called greet method. Okay. So in the greet method, I'm writing a message called good morning. Okay. So one is welcome method is available and another one is greet method is available. Welcome method and greet method is available. Now there are two methods available. Security will be applicable for all the two methods or security will be applicable for only one method, guys?
For all methods.
All the methods.
Sir, all the
Applicable
methods.
for all the methods or security will be applicable for only one method?
All the methods. All the methods.
Whenever we add the security starter in the pom.xml, that security will be applicable for all the methods in the application by default. Okay, let's go to Postman. Let me access the URL as greet without authentication. No authentication. I'm not sending any authentication in the header. Just I'm trying to access greet. Send this request. What it is saying, guys? 401 unauthorized. 401 unauthorized is available. So that means I'm not able to access. Okay. So if you go to browser, then if you use a greeter, so already in the browser we logged in. Let me close it because of that session ID. Let me open the browser again and let me hit this URL called greeter. So when I access greet URL, what it is saying? Security is required. When I access welcome, what it is saying? Security is required. So that means whenever we add security starter in the pom.xml, by default it will secure all the methods in the application. Okay, but in the real time we need to customize this. In my application, for some URLs security is required, for some URLs security is not required. For example, when I go to our application, contact us page is available. Okay, training schedule page is available. anybody can see what are the new batches available in the Ashoka IT. So to access courses offering, security is required. Security is not required, guys. To see what are the courses available in the Ashoka IT,
Not
security
required, sir.
is
Not required.
not required. When I go for training schedules, what are the new batches available? For this, security is required or security is not required?
Not required.
For this, security is required or not required? Not required.
Not required.
And when I go for login page, can anyone access login page? Yes, anybody can access login page. And when I go inside the application, when I log in, to upload the class notes, security is required. To edit the class notes, to delete the class notes, then security is required. So that means in the project, multiple methods will be available. For some methods, security is required. For some methods, security is not required. Are you able to understand my point?
Yes,
In my
sir.
project, there are several URL patterns are available. So I don't need to secure all the URL patterns. Only for few URL patterns, security required. For other URL patterns, security not required. How can we customize that? How to secure specific URL patterns in our application? Okay. So the point is, when we add security starter in the pom.xml, then it will apply security filter for all the HTTP methods of our application. If there are 10 methods, for 10 methods, security will be applicable by default. That is the default behavior of security dependency in the pom.xml. So when you add that security dependency in the pom.xml, by default, it is going to secure all the URLs of our application. But in the reality, we need to secure only few methods, not all the methods in our application. So when we are developing real-time application, if you take 10 URLs in the application, only for 7 URLs I want security. For the remaining 3 URLs, I don't want security. For example, if you see login page, for the login page, security not required. For login page, security not required. Anyone can access. For login page, security not required. Anyone can access. For example, I want to transfer amount. For this, security required. To transfer the amount, I need to log in. Security required for this. Now, I want to check the balance here. Okay. I want to check the balance in my account. For this also, security required. Okay. So to open the login page, security not required. To transfer the amount, security required. To check the balance, security required. To open about us page, for this URL, security not required. If I want to open contact us page, then for that also security not required. For login page display, security not required. For a transfer, security required. For balance, security required. For about us, security not required. For contact us, security not required. Are you able to understand my point? When we add security starter in the pom.xml, then it will apply security filter for all the HTTP methods of our application. But in the reality, we need to secure only few methods, not all the methods in our application. So these are the examples. Then how to inform this to the Spring Security? As of now, there is no code related to Spring Security. Just to be added one dependency. Then all the URL patterns getting secured. Now I want to inform the Spring Security that for one URL pattern, security is required. For another URL pattern, security not required. So in order to achieve this, we need to implement security customization, guys. In order to achieve the above requirement, we need to customize Spring Security configuration in our project. Okay, so we need to create one configuration class. In that configuration class, we need to tell to the Spring Security boss, for this URL pattern, security is not required. For the remaining all URL patterns, security is required. That is what we need to configure. Let us go to official documentation of Spring Security so that we can understand what they are saying for this. Go to Spring Security, getting Spring Security now here. Go to the Spring Security project. So this is the dependency we need to add for that. Okay, without Spring Boot, with the Spring Boot, Spring Security starters are available for this. Okay, Gradle dependency available and Maven dependencies are available. So this is the Spring Security Git repository they have given. Okay, so Spring Boot application they have given with the security. So there are a lot of projects available. Hello World project is available. Spring Security Hello World, SRC, main, resources, YML file is available, Java code, web, main controller. Okay, in the main controller there are several methods they have given. Go to security configuration now. Yes, this is the security configuration they have given for us, right? In order to secure our application, we need to customize that security configuration. As part of that customization, they're extending from some class and all that stuff. Some basic examples are available here. Okay, Spring Security is available. In that Spring Security, we can see some basic examples. Learn about the Spring Security. The documentation is available. Is a powerful and a highly customizable authentication and access controller framework. It is the de facto standard for securing Spring-based applications. Okay, this is Spring Security focusing on providing both authentication and authorization to Java applications. All right, comprehensive extensible support for authentication and authorization, protecting against attacks like session fixation, clickjacking, cross-site request forgery, etc. Servlet API integration, optional integration with WebMVC, and much more. These are the features available in that. Okay, getting the help. I'm checking the documentation of this. Spring's projects, Spring Security projects available in the GitHub. Okay, these are the Spring Security projects they have given in the GitHub. Spring Security projects are available in the GitHub repository. Hello Spring Security application is available. Let me open this. Maven project is there. Runtime exceptions. Default security configuration they have given here. Security use cases, right? So the documentation is available in order to work with this Spring Security. Now, so whenever we add this starter, by default, all methods are getting secured. Okay, but I don't want to secure all the methods in my application. So there are two methods available. For one URL, I want security. For another URL, I don't want security. How to customize this? So in order to customize this, we need to, in order to achieve this above requirement, we need to customize security configuration in our project. Okay, so how to customize that? In order to customize this, I'm going to create one Java class in our project, guys. So that is a configuration class. Then I'm going to use that as security app security configurer. App security configurer class I'm creating. So to represent this class as a configuration class, I'm using one annotation called @configuration. We already discussed what is the purpose of @configuration. That is used to represent our Java class as a configuration class. What is the purpose of this configuration class? To enable the security. So for that, we are using one annotation called enable web security annotation. There is an annotation called configuration annotation is available, and I'm writing @enable web security annotation here to represent that this is a security configuration class. I'm enabling web security for my application. Then in the web security, guys, there is a method that we need to write, and it is used to customize security filter chain. There is a method called security filter chain method. Is that interface is available. We need to inform to that security filter chain for which URLs security is required, for which URLs security is not required. We need to configure that by using configuration class. So in this configuration class, we are going to customize this security filter chain. For this security filter chain, we are going to inform for which methods security is required, for which methods security is not required. So how to do this? Public security filter chain. It is an interface. Now security config method I am writing. For this method, I am taking HTTP security object as a parameter. HTTP object I am taking as a parameter. Now, in this method, we need to customize the logic. For which URL patterns security is required, for which URL patterns security is not required. Now, so I want to represent this as a Spring Bean. For this, I am using @bean. This is an interface basically. Security filter chain is basically a interface. By using this, I am going to inform to the security for which URLs security is required, for which URLs that security is not required. For which URLs security is required, for which URLs that security is not required. Now, how to do that customization, guys? In order to customize that, I'm going to write the logic. HTTP dot authorize request is available. Authorize request available. So I'm going to pass the request object, whatever the request is coming. So for this request, in this request, for which one that security is required, for which one that security is not required. Okay, I have the request object now. Request object dot ant matchers. Request object dot ant matchers will be available. HTTP dot authorize HTTP requests. Okay, in the authorized HTTP requests, I'm taking the request object request dot ant matchers, that method request matchers, whatever the URL patterns which is available as /welcome. Okay, that /welcome URL pattern dot permit all. Whatever the request is coming with the /welcome, then permit that request. Then any other request, any other request that we are getting, that request should be authenticated. Any other request which is coming, that request should be authenticated in our application. Okay, guys. So then I'm going to specify return http.build. So the default security object I am building. Okay. So here dot authenticated is available. Right. So I'm taking security filter chain and I'm taking the HTTP security object as a parameter. For this security object, what I am telling, boss, whatever the request is coming to you, coming to this application, you take that request and check the request matches URL pattern. If the URL pattern is /welcome, then permit. So for that means for /welcome URL pattern, security not required, you permit that. If any other URL pattern request is coming, then you need to authenticate that request. So in this application, we are having welcome and greet. For welcome, I am permitting. For greet, authentication is required. So I am customizing that filter chain. I want to allow the URL pattern /welcome. Any other URL pattern which is coming, that should be authenticated. That is the meaning of this logic. So whatever the request is coming, you check that request. If the request URL pattern matching with /welcome, you permit. If any other request is coming, then you authenticate that request. That is the customization I'm doing to the security object. Using that security object, I am returning that filter chain. Filter chain interface is used to take care of each and every request validation in our application. Now, let us try. Is this working as expected or not? I'm starting my application. Application is started. Go to Postman. No authentication. I'm not setting any authentication. Let me access welcome. As per our configuration, we should get the response. Okay. Send the request to the welcome. Am I able to access welcome URL pattern, guys? Am I able to access welcome? Is it
Sir,
asking
yes,
for
sir.
security or it is not asking for security?
Not asking for security.
Not
Not
asking, sir. Yeah.
Now go to browser, open the new browser, access /welcome. When I hit the URL /welcome, what is happening? When I hit
Not
the
asking
URL
the-
/welcome, what is happening, guys? When I hit the URL /welcome, what is happening?
It's not authentic. It's not
It
asking
is not
authentication, sir.
asking for the credentials.
It is not asking for the credentials. Okay. Now let me go for another URL pattern, which is called greet. Greet. When I access greet URL, access to the localhost was denied. You don't have authorization to view this page. When I access greet URL, am I able to access the greet URL or I'm not able to access the greet URL?
Not able to. Not able to.
Not able to, sir.
Go to Postman, get request /welcome. Now, welcome URL pattern I'm accessing without any authentication. Now, let me access greet URL. Am I able to access greet URL or it is forbidding my request 403?
Forwarding the request.
Forbidden, sir.
Forbidden.
Forbidden.
I'm not able to access this. I'm not able to access this. So, one URL pattern I'm able to access, another URL pattern I'm not able to access. So, this is securing particular URL patterns in our application. How to secure specific URL patterns in our application. So when we add security starter in the pom.xml, then it will apply filter for all the methods of our application. But in the reality, we need to secure only few URL patterns, not all the URL patterns. So in order to achieve the above requirement, we need to customize that security configuration in our project. So how we are customizing this? Okay. So I created one class called security configurer class. Class name can be anything because it is user defined class. To represent this class as a configuration class, I'm using one annotation called @configuration. And this class is used for customizing the security. So I'm using enable web security annotation for this one. Then I am using security config bean method I am using. For this method I am taking HTTP security object. In that HTTP security object I am specifying authorize the request, any request which is coming, request matchers. So that means if the URL pattern is /welcome, then permit. Any other request comes, then you authenticate. For example, if there are other URLs available /about us, okay, then comma /contact us, /about us, /contact us. If you have multiple URLs, then in the entire application, only these three URLs will be permitted without any security, and any other URL pattern will be authenticated in our application. So like this, we can secure specific URL patterns in our application and we can allow specific URL patterns in our application. So for that, you need to customize that security in our project. How to customize that security in our project? To customize security in the project, we need to use security filter chain. In the interview, they will ask you, what is the purpose of security filter chain in the application? They will ask you a question. What is the purpose of security filter chain in the application? What is the meaning of security filter chain? That is an interface available in the Spring Security module that is used to customize the security configuration for the application. Are you clear with my point?
Sir, but for other URLs, the login page is not coming in. Sir,
Yeah, if you want to get the login page, then you need to specify form login here. When you specify form login, then it will give the login page. So if you don't write the form login, then the login page will not come. If you want the login page, whenever other URL pattern you access, if you want to get the login page, then you need to configure. Then we are getting the login page. If you see for /welcome, the login page is not coming. If you observe, there is a welcome URL. When I access welcome URL, method is getting called by default. And when I go for /greet URL, then the login page is coming. So for one method, security is not required. For another method, security is required. Form login, that means whether you want login page or not, that is optional. You can specify like this.
is it deprecated, sir? Because
that
it
means another parameter we need to supply, sir.
Okay.
So form login without parameter method is deprecated, with parameter method is not deprecated. So for the form login, I want to do this with the defaults.
Okay.
Otherwise, it doesn't show, sir. Suppose if you don't use like a form login, it's not showing.
If you don't use form login, it will not show you that.
Simply access denied only, sir. It is showing.
Yes,
Request methods is a string array actually.
Yes, it will show you access denied. And here request matches, it's basically taking variable arguments. Any number of URL patterns you can supply. Any number of URL patterns you can supply. That means which URLs security not required. In the application, 10 to 15 URLs will be available. For those URLs, Spring Security is not required. So those URLs you can allow by configuring request matches permit all. For the remaining URLs, security is required.
But here in this case, where to give the credentials for the other URLs, sir?
Already we have given in the pom.xml. It is common URL credentials for all the users now. We will change it. This is just basic demo.
Okay, okay, got you.
So for every user, different credentials you can configure.
For what is the use of build methods?
That is going to create the object for this security filter chain. HTTP build method returning default security filter chain object. HTTP security object I have taken. By using that HTTP security, I am customizing for which URLs security required, for which URLs security not required. Once that customization is completed, then by using that HTTP, I am calling the build method. It is a builder design pattern. It will return security filter chain with this customized logic. So our method should return filter chain object. Filter chain is an interface. We cannot create the object directly. So that is the reason we are calling http.build method. That method will create the object for this filter chain, implementation class object for the filter chain interface, and it will return that object. That filter chain will contain this customization.
Sir, definitely we need to configure like a form login, sir. Otherwise there is no meaning.
Sorry, I did not get your point.
No, sir. Definitely we need to configure like a form login, sir. Form login.
Now, if you use .form login, then only it will come. But generally in the real time, form logins will not be available because it is API to API communication. Na?
Okay, sir. Okay. In the header
Form
parameters.
login not required. Yes.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Form login just to show you the demo login page is coming. That's it. But in the real time, everything is B2B communication.
So auth key and
Postman
headers.
did not use form login, sir.
Sorry?
While using Postman through Access, in that time we did not use form login.
Not required. Na? In the post method, in the Postman, you are going to send username password. This is a login page form only. Username password you are sending in the header.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Whether you send the details from the login page or whether you send from this header, the both ways are same. It is sending the request along with the authentication header. The header key will be authorization and the header value will be username colon password. This username password will go to the server. When you send from the postman, this data will go username and password. When you send from the login page also, username and password will go to the server. In the server, security filter chain will be available. It will verify whether this URL having the security, but this URL does not have the security. If it is having security, it will check credentials are valid or not. Where the credentials available? In the properties file, credentials are available. If the credentials are matching, it will allow. For example, the request is coming from the user for the /welcome. What is the meaning of the /welcome URL pattern? Am I permitting that
Locking
URL?
it, sir.
Am I authenticating that URL?
Permitting all the acts.
Yes, that means whenever a request comes to the welcome, about us, contact us, permit all. For those three URL patterns, security not required, it is going to permit. For those three URLs, security not required, it is going to permit. So if you want to login page, then /grid form login if you specify, then login page will come. When you access welcome, no login page, directly we are able to access. So in your project, for which URLs security is required, for which URLs security is not required, that you can customize by using one configuration class.
Sir, if you remove form login, how to authenticate, sir?
By using header. In the Postman, you need to send the request in the header like this, not from the browser. From the browser, you can't access. Only through Postman or through other application, you can access that.
Sir, if you access like this, it will work, sir. Like
Yes, yes. Basic authentication, username and password. Send the request. Now, no, it is not working. Username is Ashok IT. Password is Ashok IT @123. Basic authentication I have used.
After changing it, we did not start the application.
Sorry.
After changing that form.login, we did not start the application, I think.
I think let
no,
me
sir, restarted, not DevOps. Okay.
remove the form login. I restarted my application. Click on send. No, for greet it is not working. For welcome it is working. For greet also I'm getting 403. Username password is valid. Basic authentication I am sending. Username and password. Basic auth. Send the request. 403 forbidden. /welcome it is allowing. /greet not allowing. Security configuration. Permit all any request that should be authenticated.
Yes, sir.
Is it required to provide a credential here, sir?
No. HTTP basic I am calling. Let me change this. HTTP dot authorize HTTP requests. For this, we need to supply the request that we are going to pass. Dot request matchers. The URL pattern, which is /welcome. That URL pattern I want to permit. Then any other request which is coming, that should be authenticated. Okay. Then HTTP basic I am using for this. And form login I'm using for this. Customizer we need to configure with the basic.
పోయొచ్చినారా మీరు?
ఈ ప్రోగ్రామ్స్ ఏదో ఇప్పుడే స్టార్ట్ చేస్తున్నారు.
ఏం ప్రోగ్రామ్స్? తినే
I'm
ప్రోగ్రామ్స్
taking the default basic authentication and I'm taking the default form login with the defaults. I think it is a static method. Static import we need to do for this. Security filter chain request matches slash welcome. Security filter chain, any request that should be authenticated. So basic authentication we are giving with the defaults. I'm not getting the static import for the defaults. That should have a static import. With the defaults is a predefined method that I want to access. So then I want to go with the default basic authentication and a default form login. I want to do that. HTTP basic. These methods are deprecated. We need to pass the URL. One minute, guys, I'm checking.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
With the defaults, that is a predefined URL, predefined method. HTTP basic with the defaults. Bean is imported, configuration, HTTP security, web security, filter chain. That is fine. Guys, I need to pass with the defaults method to load the default configuration for basic authentication and for form login. But that with the defaults method import is not coming. It's basically a static method. We need to do the static import. It's failing. Null pointer. We are passing null value, so we are getting a null pointer exception for that. Static import I need to do.
So can we pass username and password which we mentioned in the property files?
Can we pass?
Like in a form login, can we pass the username and password which we mentioned in the property file?
Yeah, that is what you need to mention.
Okay, with default, it is going to directly take it from it, or how it is?
Default it
Like
will take
what?
from the properties file, sir.
Okay.
Whatever you configure in the properties file, that one it will take the default. If you don't want that properties file, then there are options. In-memory authentication, JDBC authentication is available. We'll talk about that. So for understanding purpose, first we have taken the default credentials without configuring this. The default username will be user, password is generated on the console. So then I want to override the default credentials. For that reason, I'm using the properties file. I'm configuring username and password. Okay. Now for the authentication, by default it is securing all the URL patterns, but my requirement is I want to secure only particular URL patterns. To secure only particular URL patterns, I'm customizing that security filter chain. When I'm customizing the security filter chain, HTTP basic and form login methods are deprecated. They are expecting some parameter. The parameter that we need to supply, customizer. HTTP basic method. I want to call this HTTP basic method by passing some customization. For this, I want to use a method called with defaults method. So I want to load this security with the default configuration. But when I call with the defaults method, it is not getting imported. This is not our method. It's a predefined method. A static import should come. That static import is not working.
Sir.
Import.
Sir, it's a customizer dot with the defaults, sir.
Sorry?
Customizer dot with the defaults. Static
Customizer
method.
dot with the defaults. It is coming like that. Customizer config is available. Yeah. Customizer with the defaults we are able to access. Yeah. Customizer with the defaults we are accessing. Let us see whether it is loading or not. So my requirement for the welcome URL pattern, security should not be applicable. Anyone should be able to access welcome. If anyone access any other URL, that should be authenticated with the basic authentication and with the help of form login. So let me run this application now. Let me close the browser and let me open, because in the browser, once you log in one time, then that token will be stored in the browser. So when you close that browser, that token will be removed. So fine. Let us go to localhost colon 8080/welcome. Welcome URL we are able to access without any security. Now let me go for greet URL/greet. For this, the login page should come. Login page is coming. Let me give valid username and valid password. Ashok IT and Ashok IT @123. Bad credentials it is saying. Even though if you are giving the correct data, it is not. Yes, now 200 from the postman I am able to access. Let me give the valid password. Username is Ashok IT, Ashok IT @123. Yes, we are able to access. For one URL pattern, security is applied. For another URL pattern, security is not applied. So this is the customization that we are doing in our application. One URL pattern I'm securing, another URL pattern I'm not securing. So for this, we are customizing that security filter chain by using this authorize HTTP request method, I'm taking the request object. If the request URL matching with welcome, permit. Any other request comes, authenticate. How to authenticate? Basic authentication it has to follow with the default values, default configuration, and form login it should show. When you access from the browser, it will show you form login with the default configuration. When you are accessing from the Postman, then you need to supply the authorization header with the basic auth, username and password. Click on send. Greet method we are able to access. Suppose if I don't pass authentication for the greet method, when I click on send, I'm getting unauthorized. Without passing the credentials for the greet method, I'm not able to access. And for the welcome, without passing this credentials, we should be able to access, because welcome is permitted, greet is not permitted. For the welcome without authentication also, I'm able to access. For the greet without authentication, I am not able to access. When you are accessing this URL from the Postman, we need to pass basic authentication details, our credentials. Where our credentials are configured? Our credentials are configured in the properties file. Now, so by using those credentials, I'm able to access. Now, if you remember, the REST APIs are stateless. Okay, every request will be considered as a first request. In every request, you need to send your authentication, username and password, then only it will allow you, otherwise it will not allow you. If I remove the authentication, if I try to access greet, my request is not processed. So when I pass authentication in the request, then only my request is processed. So for welcome, security is not required, but for the greet, security is required as per our customization in the security configuration. Security filter chain is the most important interface in the Spring Security module. It will manage the complete security for our application. For which URLs security required, for which URLs security is not required, that will be managed by security filter chain. Okay, how to secure specific URL patterns in our application. Okay, so this is the logic we are writing. I was checking for with the defaults, it is available in the customizer. What is this customizer? Class or interface. This is a functional interface. There is one method called void method is available, and there is a static method available with the defaults. They are returning that. So default configuration that we are going to follow in order to secure our application with the basic authentication with the form login. Form login is required only when you want to open login page in the browser. Otherwise, it is not required. Are you clear with my point?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. Sir, if you want to customize like a username and password, sir, in this one.
I will come to next point is that only, sir.
Okay.
Sir, if you want access without form login, how to authenticate, sir?
Sorry?
If you don't want with form login, how to authenticate?
From the Postman you are sending, na? In the Postman authentication we are sending. Okay. Now, so now the requirement for you today, the task that I am giving for you is you need to develop one REST API, which is secured REST API with basic authentication. Secured REST API. That security we have implemented with the basic auth. Okay, how to add the basic auth, guys? Whatever I have done now, I have added security starter. I configure the properties in the properties file. So in order to access my REST API, the basic authentication username is available and password is also available. Username is available and password is also available. So now can I consider my REST API is a secured REST API? Yes. So in my REST API security, username I have given as Ashok IT, password I have given as Ashok IT @123. Now I want you people to develop a consumer. I want you people to develop a consumer application. This consumer application should access secured REST API by using REST template or web client. So you need to develop a client application. That client application should access secured REST API. Earlier we developed a REST template and we are able to access, and we developed web client logic also. But at that time, our consumer accessed provider directly. Provider don't have any security. Now my provider is secured and you need to develop a provider application. Whatever is there in the document, the same thing. You need to create a boot application and you need to customize the credentials in the properties file, and you customize the URL pattern security by using this logic. Now the requirement, you need to develop one provider. That provider should have basic authentication with username and password. Now you need to develop a consumer application. That consumer should access provider. Directly can we access or we can't access directly? Consumer can access the provider directly or consumer cannot access the provider directly?
Not
Cannot
access
access.
directly,
Cannot
sir.
access directly.
Cannot access.
Provider is secured. Consumer cannot access provider directly because of the security reason. Then in order to access the secured provider, what consumer should do is send security details in request header. Send the security details in the request header. Okay, header key, that is authorization, will be available, and this is the key we need to send as authorization, and whatever the value we need to send username and password as value. Whatever the username and password you are sending in the authorization header, if they are valid, then your request will be processed. If they are not valid, your request cannot be processed. So the task is how to develop a consumer which will access secured provider with basic authentication. That is the requirement. Are you able to understand my point?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You got the clarity. As of now, our provider is ready. That provider we are able to access from the browser. That provider we are able to access from the browser, and we are able to access from the Postman. But the same provider I want you to access from another application, guys. You need to develop a consumer application. That consumer application should access secured REST API. How the REST API is secured? With the basic authentication we have secured. Username is there, password is there. So consumer application should access the secured provider which is having basic authentication. So the clue I am giving, in order to access the provider, you need to send that authentication details in the request header. Send authentication details in the request header. How to send? Key and value. Key is authorization, header key is authorization, header value, username and password. By using REST template you can send the header. By using web client also you can send the header. That is what I want you people to try. Can you do that, guys? I have given the clue also.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Can anyone tell me what is the requirement now?
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, you want to say like secure REST API, suppose it's a CRUD application, and there is another application which is trying to access the CRUD data. So to that, he has to provide some security credentials to access this REST secure API.
Correct.
All right, all right. Sure, sir. We will try this one.
You got my point.
Yeah, I got it.
Yes. Anyone having any questions on the requirement? Anybody having any questions on the requirement? Anybody not able to understand the requirement, please let me know. I will explain. Anybody not able to understand the requirement, could you please confirm? It will take just 5 minutes of time. to complete this task. It will take just 5 minutes of time to complete this task. Yes, all of you okay with the requirement?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So what is the requirement? Develop REST API with HTTP basic authentication and configure auth credentials in application.properties file. Whatever I have done. So you need to create one Spring Boot application. In that Spring Boot application, you need to add the security starter. Then by default, basic authentication will be available for your application. For authentication, whatever the credentials are required, we need to configure those credentials in our properties file, username and password. If you want to secure only one URL pattern, then you can add the customization for that. Few URLs I want to allow, few URLs I want to secure. Then the requirement is develop REST API with the basic authentication and configure authentication credentials in the properties file. Okay, so this is first requirement. Then test this API from the Postman. Test this REST API from browser and from Postman. I have explained how to test it from the browser, how to test it from the Postman. When you access from the browser, login page will come. When you are testing from the Postman, you need to send the authentication details in the header. Then next one, the requirement 2, develop consumer application to access above REST API, which is secure. So consumer, how many ways we can develop consumer in the Spring Boot, guys?
Template.
How many ways we can develop the consumer in the Spring Boot?
3 ways, sir.
3 ways. In 3 ways we can develop the consumer in the Spring Boot. What are those 3 ways?
REST template.
Yes, you can develop the consumer in 3 ways. What are those 3 ways? One is by using REST template. Another one is by using web client. Third one is Currently, we don't have service registry, so we are going with REST template or web client. You develop this consumer application to access above the REST API, which is secure. So the basic concept is how to send basic authentication header details by using REST template, how to send authentication details by using web client, how to send the header. So whatever the consumer application you are developing, that consumer application should send the authentication details in the request header. If the authentication details are valid, then the request will be processed. Otherwise, your request will not be processed. In the previous classes, we have developed consumer using REST template and web client. But at that time, we did not send the security credentials. At that time, our API was not secured. But now, our API is secured. So how to access secured REST API using consumer application? Are you clear with my point? Are you clear with my point now? Come on.
Yes, sir, we got it.
Very good. Now, if you observe in this application, the username and password is fixed. Okay. But in the application, for our provider, multiple consumers can be available. Okay. So if you see, then example, there is a IRCTC provider is available. For the IRCTC is a provider. For that provider, multiple consumers available. Make My Trip available. Yatra is available. GoIbibo is available. Make My Trip is one consumer. Yatra is one consumer. GoIbibo is one consumer. So multiple consumers available for our provider. Make My Trip is available, Yatra is available, and Go iBibo is available. Should I give same credentials for all the users, all the consumers to access my provider? Am I going to share same credentials for every user to access my application?
No,
Is
sir.
it recommended?
Not recommended.
Is it recommended, guys? Now, for the entire application, I have given username, password. This is fixed username and password. If multiple consumers are available for our application, all the consumers should use the same credentials to access the provider. So in the real time, for all the consumers, are we going to share the same credentials or we need to share the different credentials? Same credentials or different credentials, guys?
Different credentials.
Different credentials. So that means how to configure different credentials for users in the application. Currently, I am configuring username and password in the properties file, which is common for everybody. So if you are developing 10 consumers also, for 10 consumers, we are configuring same credentials, which is not recommended. So that's where in the Spring Boot security concept, there is a mechanism called in-memory authentication mechanism is available. In the last week security workshop, faculty also explained what is in-memory authentication. Any idea what is in-memory authentication in the project, guys?
You can store the credential in the in-memory.
Yes.
And also set the credentials.
Yeah, for authentication purpose, whatever the credentials are required, those credentials we are going to store within our application only. Okay. In-memory authentication means storing user credentials in the program only for the authentication purpose. So for every user, I want to give different credentials. So then we can go with a concept called in-memory authentication. Remember, this is only for practice, not for the real time. This is used only for practice, not recommended in real time. Okay, whatever in-memory authentication we are using, that is only for our practice purpose. It is not recommended in the real time manner. In-memory authentication means storing user credentials in the program for the authentication purpose. This is used only for the practice purpose, not recommended for real time. This is used only for practice purpose, not recommended for the real time. So how to work with this in-memory authentication in the Spring Boot? Go to our security, remove the properties now. Whichever is hard-coded, I'm removing these properties from the properties file and I want to configure in-memory authentication details. So for this, I'm going to create one bean, which is public in-memory user details manager. I'm taking one bean in-memory user details manager. So I'm taking in-memory users. So what are the users are required? I'm going to configure. So let me create user details. Let me take one user details class in the Spring Security. User details, which is U1 is equal to user with a default password encoder. Okay. So the username, what is the username for this user? With the default password encoder with the dot username and dot password. User, new user, which user object? Security user object we are taking with the default password encoder dot, there should be a method. User details, U1 is equal to user dot with the default password encoder dot username. So my username is Ashok IT and password. What is the password for that user? You can configure. Username and password. Okay. So Ashok IT @ 123.build. So that means I am building one user object here. So for the Ashok user, I have given the credentials with the username and password. So similarly, I can create one more user, and U2, for U2, I'm giving the different username and a different password, something like Raju@123, and build the Raju object. So two users I configured as in-memory users. Now these users I want to use for authentication purpose. So return new in-memory user details manager. Let me create the object for this. Return new in-memory user details manager, user1 comma user2 is available. So like this you can configure multiple users for authentication. For every user a name and password I'm giving. Let me represent this as a Spring Bean. So earlier our application used credentials from the properties file. If I configure credentials in the properties file, same credentials will be used for every user, for every consumer. Now I want to give different credentials for every user. That's why I'm creating one bean, in-memory user detail manager bean I am creating. For that bean I am passing my user objects, user1 comma user2 objects I am passing for that. So user1 Ashok and user2 Raju. Now when we are accessing secured methods, right, application should perform the authentication. The authentication it should perform by using in-memory users. So this is only for practice, how to configure multiple users for authentication in our application. Now let's try this. Let me close my browser. Okay, now let me run this. Refresh, update the Maven project, guys. I configured in-memory user details in our application. I configured in-memory user details in my application. Let's run the boot application now. I will try to access from the Postman. So in our configuration class, two beans we have configured. One is in-memory user detail manager bean is available, and another one is security filter chain bean is available. Security filter chain bean available, in-memory user details manager bean is also available. Now, and in the filter chain, I have configured welcome URL should be allowed. The remaining URLs should be authenticated. And the user detail manager bean I configured, these two users should be used for authentication. If any request comes with these two user credentials, then it is valid. Otherwise, it is invalid. Go here. First, let me access welcome. No security. No need of any authentication. You see, for this welcome URL, authentication type is no auth. No auth. Click on send. Then I'm able to get the response. So that means for the welcome URL pattern, security is not applicable. For the welcome URL pattern, security is not applicable. Anybody can access that. Security is not applicable. Anybody can access that. Send a request. Even from the browser also, we can access that welcome URL pattern. There is no need of security for the welcome. Anybody can access that. Yes, we are able to access. Then if you go for greet URL, it should open login page. For the greet URL, login page is coming because it is secured. Now let me access greet URL without authentication. No, it is not allowed. Only welcome is allowed, greet is not allowed. For the greet, security credentials, where the credentials configured in memory. In memory detailed manager is available with the credentials. Earlier in the properties file we configured. Now I configured in the program itself by using in memory. Now go here. Use authentication credentials. Use some wrong details. Wrong username. Wrong password. Try to send a request with the wrong details. No, it is not allowing me. That means it is validating the given credentials are valid or not. Where is the logic to validate the credentials, guys? Did we implement any logic to validate the login credentials?
No, sir.
Did we implement any logic to validate the credentials? Then how it is getting validated? Who is validating our credentials now? Who is validating our credentials now?
Spring security.
In memory.
Security
Security, sir.
dependency.
Internally.
Inside the Spring Security, authentication manager will be available who is going to validate our credentials. So credentials will be compared with the in-memory users. Whatever the credentials I'm sending, if these credentials are matching with my in-memory credential manager, then only request will be authenticated, then the request will be processed. Otherwise, that request will not be processed. So go here and username, password wrong, not able to access. But if you go for welcome, you can access without authentication also. Authentication is not required for the welcome. So don't need to send any authentication for the welcome. Send the request. Yes, I'm able to access the welcome 200. Success. But when I go for greet without authentication, I'm not able to access. Now go for authentication. Username Raju and password Raju@123. See the credentials in the in-memory. Username is Raju. Password is Raju@123. Send the request. Credentials are valid. That's why our request is processed successfully. And let me try with another user. Another username. What is that? Ashok IT and Ashok IT@123. Ashok IT is available and I'm using Ashok IT@123. Send the request. Yes. Now also I'm able to access because of credentials valid. Give the password wrong. 1234. Send the request. Failed. Not able to access. So can we say our REST API is secured with in-memory authentication now? Guys, can we say our REST API is secured with in-memory authentication now?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
Our REST API is
Yes, sir, yes,
secured with in-memory authentication now. So what is the difference? If I configure credentials in the properties file or if I go for in-memory authentication?
In the property file, we can configure only one credentials.
In the properties file, we are configuring only one user
One
credentials. And when you go for in-memory authentication,
We have multiple credentials.
multiple
do
credentials we
multiple.
can configure. Like, can I configure one more user also?
Yes, sir, we can.
Yes, U3 I'm going to give. User 3 object I'm configuring. So this name something like John @123. Okay. So user 1, user 2, user 3 objects available. Let me pass them. U1, U2, U3. 3 objects I am passing for the detail manager. So whenever the request comes, first it will check in the security filter chain. Whatever the request is coming, first it will check in the security filter chain. For that URL, security is required or security not required. For that particular URL, security is required or security is not required, it will check in that. You will to follow me. Whatever the URL that we are trying to access, for that URL, security required or not required. Who will maintain that information in our application? Security required or security not required? Who will maintain that information, guys?
Security
chain,
filter
sir.
chain.
Security filter.
Security filter chain will maintain. In the security filter chain, we are able to recognize for which URL permission is available, for which URL authentication is available. For the welcome, permission is available. Anybody can access welcome. But for other request, security is available. Authentication is required. So once the URL pattern is having authentication, then it will go here. What are the users available in our application for authentication? So they are sending username as Ashok IT, password as Ashok IT@1234. Then it will check in the in-memory details. Is there any user available with the given username and password? No, there is no user credentials are matching with the given data. As the user details are not matching with the given data, then authentication is failed. You are not able to access that. Suppose if you send the request with the valid credentials, so whatever the data you have given, that data is matching with first user credentials, that means your authentication is successful, then the request is processed as expected.
Sir, can
Your
you
request
please
is
explain
processed
the
as
flow
expected.
one more time, sir? Here.
Sorry?
Can you please explain the flow one more time from here? How it
Huh.
goes back to the.
Whenever you send a request,
Uh-huh.
first that request will go to security filter chain.
Okay.
In the security filter chain, it will identify for that URL authentication is required or permission is available. Okay. What is the meaning of a permit all?
It permits all the users for the welcome.
No authentication required.
No
No need
authentication.
of authentication. No need of authentication. Whenever the request comes to that URL pattern, it will permit. Anybody can access that URL without any authentication. Suppose if a request comes with a different URL pattern that is not permitted, any other request except this URL, if any other request comes, authentication is required. What kind of authentication? Basic authentication is required for that. So for the basic authentication, it should validate the credentials. Client is already sending the credentials in the header. Basic authentication. So basic auth is selected. Then he is sending username and password. Okay, sending the username and password in the header. Now you see authorization header key is going. The value is also going there. That means whatever the credentials you are giving here, username and password, the data is going in the request header. The key is authorization and the value is basic space username and password in the encoded format. Whatever the data client is sending, that data is matching with any user credentials in the in-memory. If it is matching, the request will be processed. If it is not matching, the request will be denied. So first it will check for this URL, security is available or not available. Then validate the credentials. Client is sending the credentials in the request header in the form of authorization. Authorization is the key. Basic space username password encoded will go in the request header. Those credentials are matching with our username password of users. If it is matching, request will be processed. If it is not matching, request will be denied.
So when in the security filter chain, when it sees the authenticated, then it automatically goes to the other bin where you have the in-memory user details. Sir?
Automatically it will verify that. That is internal functionality where the authentication manager will verify credentials are matching with our user credentials or not. Customer given, client given credentials are matching with our user credentials or not, it will verify. If it is matching, then authentication success, request will be processed. If not matching, authentication failure, request will not be processed.
Sir, in this case, defaults are not needed, sir, in the HTTP basic default.
Yes, sir. Default configuration. I am not customizing anything. Whatever the form login default page I want, whatever the basic authentication default I want. If you don't pass this, in the older version of the Spring Boot, that is valid. But they are deprecated in the latest version of the Spring Boot. So they are expecting some parameter, which is a customizer object.
Suppose if you want to give like a different form login, we can pass her here. If you want to get like a different login page.
Yeah, you can develop your own form for the security. You can customize and you can pass that.
Okay, sir.
Sir,
yes.
If you configure the credential in both in memory and also application properties, you will take which one?
In memory one, sir.
Okay, it's override.
Yeah. And in the real time, this is also not recommended. Are we going to configure credentials in the in-memory and in the properties file in the real time?
No.
Where we will configure them?
Database.
Yes. So that is our next example. How to implement application login and registration functionality with the Spring Security. So in the tomorrow's class, I'm going to explain the real world security application with the login and registration. Okay, this is used only for practice purpose, not recommended in the real time. This is in-memory details user manager that I have given for you. Okay, so I want all of you to do the practice and complete this assignment also, guys. I have given a requirement for you. So the requirement is you need to develop REST API with basic authentication, configure authentication credentials in the properties file, or use in-memory authentication users. Use in-memory authentication. Anything is fine. So you should develop one REST API. How I developed one REST API with Spring Security? I want you people to develop the REST API like this. then test that REST API from the Postman. Once your testing is completed, then you need to develop a consumer application to access the secured REST API. You can use REST template or Postman. The logic, the clue, you need to send authentication token details in the request header. If you send valid credentials, then your request will be processed. Otherwise, your request will not be processed. So I want all of you to work on this today. So tomorrow I'm going to explain how to implement login and registration functionalities by using Spring Security with the database integration. Whenever user register, I want to store the user data in the database. When user login, I want to verify credentials are valid or not. If the credentials are valid, authentication success. Otherwise, authentication failure. You got my point?
Sir, how to secure one API? Like, see, authentication is fine, but how to secure the call should be made from only API and gateway or something like it should come from the only one host. Only then allow access to your provider. Otherwise, if it is coming from some other host or from some other
that
machine.
concept is IP whitelisting concept will be there in the real time, sir. If the request is coming from particular IP address, they're only process, otherwise don't process. In the company level, at the networking level, they will manage that. So from the code standpoint, whenever the request is coming, authentication details are coming or not. If authentication details are coming, we'll process. Otherwise, we will not process.
Okay, so on the request level, we cannot configure that one, right? That is on the network level only.
Network level, yes. Network level.
Okay.
Good. Fine, guys. Today we understood the fundamental concepts of Spring Security. Still, we did not enter into the real-time security implementation, guys. So whatever we learned today, that is basic fundamental concept. Spring Security, which is one of the very, very important concept for every application that we are developing. So Spring Security is a predefined module in the Spring framework. By using that, we can implement authentication and authorization. Okay. Authentication means verifying who can access our application. Authorization means verifying who can access which functionality in our application. So how to work with Spring Security in the project? There is a security starter available. If you add that starter, then security will be enabled for our application by default. The default security we are getting for our application is called as a basic authentication. When you add the basic authentication, random password will be generated for our application. So the default username will be user, password will be printed on the console. With that, we can access our application from the browser. Login page will come. If you want to access from the Postman, you need to send that username password as authentication token in the request header. Suppose if you don't want to go with that username and password, then you can override the credentials. Okay. To override the credentials, we can configure in the properties file or YML file. So one user credentials we can configure like this. Whenever we add that security starter in the project pom.xml, by default, it will secure all the URLs available in the application. But in the real time, we don't need to secure all the URLs. We need to customize that. Only for few URLs, security is required. For other URLs, security not required. How to customize that? For that, I created one separate configuration class, guys. Security configuration class I have created. In that configuration class, I am customizing that. Any request comes with welcome, I want to permit. Any other request which we are having, I want to secure. Okay. For this, we are going with in-memory authentication here. So in the properties file, we are able to configure only one user details, one username and one user password. Suppose if you want to deal with multiple users for the authentication, Spring Security supports in-memory authentication also. This in-memory authentication is only for practice purpose, but not used in the real time. Okay. So how to configure in-memory users in the application? To configure in-memory users in the application, I have created one bean, in-memory user detail manager bean I have created. In that bean, I have stored multiple user details, user 1, user 2 and user 3. Right. So we are able to develop that application and we are able to test with the different scenarios. All the test cases are passed. Then I have given one requirement for you. Whatever the application I have developed in the class today, that is a provider application. I want all of you to develop such kind of a provider with the security. Authentication details you can configure in the properties file or you can configure in the in-memory. So once that application is ready, then you test it from the Postman. Then you develop one consumer application to access secured REST API. So how consumer will send the credentials to the provider in the HTTP request? That is the conclusion of this assignment. So consumer application should access secured provider. Okay, provider credentials available. Send authentication details in the request header. Key is authorization, value, that username and password you need to send. Okay, so I want all of you to implement this requirement before coming to tomorrow session. Tomorrow I will show you Spring Security with the DB integration, user registration, user login by using Spring Security. We will understand in the tomorrow session. All of you clear with my point?
Sir, one doubt,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Yes, sir.
The security and all we will implement in API gateway or in
API
REST
gateway.
API. Okay, then
Security,
we
whatever
have
the
to
security
connect.
logic we are writing, that will be implemented in the API gateway. I will show you microservices security integration. First, let's understand the concept. Once you understand the concept, then we will see where we will implement this security in the real time.
Okay, sir.
First, we should know the concept. All of you agree for doing the assignment?
Yes, sir.
Anybody scolding me? Sir is giving lot of assignments. It is for you only, guys. Your thought process has to change. You need to think like a real-time developer, not like Amirpet student. I want you people to think like a real-time developer. You should be able to complete the tasks on your own. That is the main agenda. Good. Fine. With this, I'm stopping for today.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Regarding that GRTP, sir. So in the morning, the project we have, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I could not find that GitHub repo, sir.
So that is a private repository, sir. You need to develop that project.
Okay, because I don't know like exactly how many parameters we have for the customer and all those things. So that's why I want to see.
You need to think and you need to develop that. So if you have any question in the class, I will clarify your doubt. If I give the Git repository, then what is the use of joining the project?
No, because for the front end, we have to add the login button, right? So
yeah, so in the tomorrow's class, we will connect and we'll discuss on that.
All right. Thank you.
Same time start like a GRTP also, sir, after this 9:30.
Sorry, sir, can you come again?
No, sir. In the same time 9:30 only you are going to start like a GRTP, sir. GRTP
No, sir.
batch also.
No. Next GRTP batch will start October ending. That will start at morning 7:30.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Okay. Good. Thank you, guys. I'm stopping for today. We'll meet in the tomorrow session. Please complete the assignment. You need to show me the assignment in the tomorrow session. Thank you, guys.